Welcome back to DFC Books. Today, we're undertaking, well, a really extensive deep dive into Albert Camus' classic, The Plague. Specifically, we're digging into the initial stages and the devastating core of the catastrophe described.
That's right. It's a work that feels incredibly relevant, maybe now more than ever, wouldn't you say? It demands a close look.
Absolutely. And we're approaching it almost like a piece of nonfiction, like a detailed chronicle.
Yes, treating it as a kind of historical document.
Yeah.
Our mission here is to follow the narrator's path really closely. We want to meticulously detail those earliest events, really analyze the setting, which is so crucial, and focus intensely on the townspeople.
Because it's their reactions, their psychology, their morality that really define the whole ordeal, isn't it?
Exactly. For anyone looking for a deep, thorough explanation of Camus' masterpiece, well, this is it. We're aiming to be your complete guide through this text.
We're basically breaking down this period of, as Camus calls them, grotesque happenings,
Yeah.
trying to understand how this seemingly ordinary city grapples with what the narrator terms an abstraction.
Which is such a powerful word for it. It's this force, part nature, part philosophy, part moral crisis, all rolled into one.
Yeah, and we need to get beyond just the plot points. We really want to get into why these characters act the way they do, and how Camus uses their individual stories to explore bigger ideas, like, human solidarity, #tag, IPOOK introduction setting, and narrative voice.
Okay, so to really grasp the ordeal, we have to start with the setting. Ground zero, the city of Oran.
Right, on the Algerian coast. And Camus doesn't just place the story there. He builds Oran very deliberately. It's meant to reflect something, isn't it? A kind of spiritual emptiness.
Precisely. The narrator tells us right away it's a large French port, but it's defined by its ugliness, its smugness, and this sort of placid obsession with commerce, with business.
And the lack of things is so key. The sources really hammer this home. It's a thoroughly negative place. You don't find the usual charms of a city. No pigeons, no trees, no gardens.
It's like the inhabitants just stripped away anything poetic or natural. It's dry, it's functional, it's just relentless commerce.
That sense of aesthetic lack, that emptiness, it feels foundational. It reflects the state of the people living there.
Totally. And life itself is harsh. Extreme conditions, those dry, sizzling summers baking everything. Then the autumns, just deluges of mud. The narrator says the seasons are only really marked by the quality of the sky.
Only winter brings any kind of pleasantness, any relief. It suggests this sort of built-in societal discomfort baked into the city's very design.
But the detail that really sends a chill down your spine, the one that tells you everything about Oran's priorities.
You mean the bit about dying there, how difficult it is.
Exactly. The narrator's analysis is remarkable here. He said the whole atmosphere, the violent temperatures, the constant exigencies of business, the frankly uninspiring surroundings, it all demands good health.
So if you're sick, if you're an invalid, you feel completely out of place, like an inconvenience.
Profoundly out of it is the
Right.
phrase used. The city is so focused on the secular, on profit, that death itself becomes this awkward disruption, something interfering with invoices and shipments.
Imagine being trapped behind those hundreds of walls all sizzling with heat, while everyone around you is just talking business. Bills of lading, discounts.
It's an exhausting place. It rejects frailty. It's not built for human vulnerability.
And the narrator documenting all this, he plays such an interesting role. He doesn't even give us his name at first.
No, that reveal comes right at the end, Dr. Bernard Rio. But from the very beginning, he establishes his approach. It's almost like a journalist laying out their evidence, very methodical.
He justifies his role as a historian, right, based on different kinds of data.
3 kinds, specifically, and they're interwoven. First, what he saw himself, his direct experiences. Second, accounts from other eyewitnesses. And crucially, this includes their personal impressions, their feelings. He knows just listing facts isn't enough.
Right, the emotional response is part of the story.
Absolutely. And third, he uses subsequent documents, official papers, statistics. This blend gives the whole narrative this unique voice, detached, almost clinical sometimes, yet deeply human. He's aiming for objectivity, but he never forgets the human cost.
It's a choice, isn't it, to be impartial, but also universal. His mission, which is kind of our mission for this deep dive too, is to chronicle these bizarre, awful events.
These grotesque happenings, yeah.
And examine how these ordinary townspeople react when this massive irrational force, this abstraction of catastrophe, crashes into their very orderly, very commercial lives.
So the first part of the novel, that initial phase,
Yeah.
it's completely defined by this really surreal prelude, to the main disaster, the great pestilence of rats.
It lasts just under 2 weeks, right? A horrifying warning sign.
Exactly. The warning sign the town collectively, desperately tries to ignore.
And it starts on a specific date, April 16th. Dr. Reeve finds the first dead rat right on his own landing. It's personal, immediate.
He sort of shrugs it off, thinks it's just an isolated thing. But it's the concierge, Misha Mitchell, whose reaction is really telling. That immediate, visceral outrage.
He's the gatekeeper, isn't he? Symbolizing the town's rigid order. And he's adamant. There weren't no rats here.
Precisely. He blames it on kids, mischief. He can't accept that something unnatural, something dirty, could originate from within their clean, business-like world, where it is too smug, too proper for rats dying on doorsteps.
But it escalates so fast. The very next day, April 17th, Michelle finds 3 more in the hall. Rhea sees dozens in the garbage cans.
And suddenly, it's not just a weird incident. It becomes a topic of conversation all over Oran. Though initially, people just treat it as a disgusting nuisance, like the sanitation department isn't doing its job.
But the sheer scale of it becomes undeniable, gruesome even. Within days, they're everywhere.
Factories, warehouses, public offices, even school playgrounds and cafe terraces. The source mentions busy places like the Place d'Armes just dotted with these repulsive little corpses.
And that detail about walking at night, feeling that squelchy roundness of a still warm body underfoot, it's visceral.
It really is. It conveys that sensory horror. The feeling described is like the earth itself purging abscesses and pus clots, nature actively rebelling against Oran's enforced tidiness, its lack of soul, chaos made physical.
And then comes the number that sort of pierces the denial.
Yes. The Ransdaq Information Bureau. April 25th. They announced the figure. 6,231 rats collected and burned in a single day.
6,000. That sheer number. It finally jolts people. They start to think, okay, maybe this is something more than just unpleasant, something vaguely menacing.
Fear starts to creep in. People
Yeah.
talk about leaving, and then just as suddenly as it started,
It stops. April 29th, the rats vanish.
total silence. And everyone breathes this huge sigh of relief. Crisis averted, right? They thought it was over.
But it wasn't the end. It was the transition. Because the final, terrible event of this first part happens that very same day the rats disappear.
The first human casualty, M. Shell, the very man who denied the rats could even be there. He's found dragging himself along, sick.
With those specific pains, the narrator describes neck, armpits, groin, classic bubonic symptoms.
He dies. And his death, as the narrator puts it, marked, one might say, the end of the first period, that of bewildering portents. The strange signs give way to outright panic.
It's such a chilling turn. Dismiss the warnings all you want. The catastrophe doesn't care about your relief. It just moves on to the next stage. Hashtag 3 key characters and their initial positions in Oran.
Okay, so the plague is now undeniable, even if not yet officially declared. This forces an immediate kind of moral sorting among the townspeople. Their initial reactions introduce us to the core cast. We have to start with the narrator himself, right?
Dr. Bernard Rio, the healer, the pragmatist.
And he's defined by isolation from the get-go. His wife leaves for a sanatorium just as the rats are starting to pile up. So he's alone, facing this escalating crisis, with only his work to ground him.
His whole philosophy seems boiled down to that one line. The thing was to do your job as it should be done.
Exactly. He has this deep distrust of abstraction, whether it's abstract ideas about God's will or abstract denials from the authorities about what's really happening. For him, abstraction kills.
So he fights it with concrete actions, lancing buboes, isolating patients, demanding practical measures, just doing the work.
When an older colleague finally whispers the word plague, Ria's reaction isn't some heroic declaration, it's just weary acceptance. He knows the name doesn't matter as much as the reality.
Yeah, call it plague, call it a strange fever. The job is the same. Stop it from killing off half the population. He's the anchor, isn't he? Practical, maybe not heroic in a flashy way, but steady against the coming storm.
Definitely the anchor. Now, moving to a much quieter, more internal kind of figure, Joseph Grant.
Grant. He's such a touching character, almost heartbreakingly human. He represents something different, doesn't he? The pursuit of small beauty amidst all the horror.
I think so. He's described as the very definition of insignificance. Physically tall, but sort of drooping, thin with that yellowish mustache. Looks like a shy priest.
And smells faintly of smoke in basement rooms. He's a municipal clerk, stuck in a temporary post forever, earning this pitifully low salary, 62 francs, 30 centimes a day.
And he's never managed to get it made permanent or get a raise, which points to his deeper struggle.
Communication. Words.
Exactly. His failure in his job, not being able to ask for what he deserves, mirrors his failure in his personal life. He couldn't communicate with his wife, Jeanne, which led to their estrangement. It all comes down to this obsessive search for the right words.
Which fuels his secret life.
Yeah.
The book he's writing, or rather the first sentence he's been writing for years.
Yes, agonizing over single adjectives for weeks on end. This intense linguistic perfectionism. It's his shield, isn't it? His way of imposing order on a messy world.
Which explains why he's initially oblivious to the whole rat thing. He literally says he has other things to think about.
His first real involvement comes just out of neighborly duty, helping Ryu when Qatar tries to kill himself. Yeah. Grand shows us that resistance doesn't have to be medical or grandly philosophical. It can be quiet, it can be just. Kindness and the belief in getting a sentence perfectly right.
Okay, next up, Jean Theroux, the observer, the diarist.
Rear first spots him watching a rat die on some steps, which tells you straight away, Theroux is paying close attention to this from the start. He's interested.
How's he described? Stocky, youngish.
Yeah, stocky, deeply furrowed face, bushy eyebrows, always smoking. He's an outsider who arrived in Iran shortly before the plague. And he starts keeping this meticulous diary.
Recording everything, right? The mundane details alongside the big philosophical thoughts.
Exactly. He notes things like the magistrate Amothon's rigid family dinner routines, but also makes these sharp observations about the town's psychology. He provides that crucial external viewpoint, complementing Rio's more internal professional one.
Then we shift to someone much darker, more unsettling. Cotard.
Cotard, the secretive salesman. Before the plague hits, he's described as quiet, isolated, traveling salesman in wines and spirits. Grand calls him a queer bird.
And he attempts suicide just before the outbreak is confirmed. Why? The narrator hints at some secret grief.
Yes, related to a past crime. Something that could lead to prison or transportation. Not murder, apparently, but serious enough that he's terrified of being caught.
And the terrible irony is, the plague saves him. In a way.
It's profoundly ironic. He's the only character who actually starts to flourish when the town gates close. The chaos, the emergency.
Yeah.
It halts the police investigation into his past.
The collective fear shields him from his private fear.
Perfectly put. So he suddenly becomes sociable, almost aggressively friendly, starts giving lavish tips, craves contact. Because for him, the plague is this massive public distraction that basically grants him amnesty. Disaster is his good fortune.
What a contrast to someone like Raymond Rambert, the journalist. The total outsider.
He's from Paris, in Oran, just to research his story. Maybe about the conditions of the Arab population, though the source isn't explicit, just that he's looking for curious stories. The key thing is, he has zero investment in Oran itself.
His motivation is pure and simple. Get out.
Get out and get back to his wife or the woman he loves in France. As soon as the gates close, that's his only goal. His initial role is really to challenge the whole quarantine, the separation, from the perspective of individual happiness and romantic love versus collective duty.
His journalistic detachment vanishes pretty quickly, doesn't it? It becomes purely personal.
Absolutely. A desperate quest for escape.
And finally, the voice representing religion, or at least organized religion, Father Panelou.
The learned Jesuit priest. Highly respected, described as militant. Rieur first encounters him actually helping the sick and Michel, the concierge, trying to get him home. So he's involved early on, in a practical way.
But his main initial contribution is philosophical, theological, that first sermon.
Delivered during the week of prayer.
Yeah.
And it is fiery, uncompromising. He lays it out in no uncertain terms. The plague is divine punishment.
He uses that harsh pronoun. Calamity has come on you, my brethren. It's accusatory.
Completely. He frames it as a deserved reckoning for the town's sins. He urges people to accept God's will, however harsh, because essentially they've brought it on themselves. That absolute certainty is his starting point.
Okay, so the death toll hits 40. It's undeniable now. The authorities officially declare a state of plague. And then comes the big measure, the closing of the town gates.
This is the event that shapes everything that follows. It creates the core condition of the novel. Total, involuntary separation.
Exile.
And the psychological impact is immediate, isn't it? This sensation of a void within.
Yes, because people suddenly realize how much their lives, their identities were tied to connections outside the city, or even just the possibility of connection. Now those bonds are physically severed. They're trapped.
And communication just collapses. Letters become unreliable, eventually stop. Telegrams are the only option.
And those telegrams, they reduce everything. Decades of shared life, deep emotions, boiled down to these stark, pre-approved, 10-word formulas. Am well, always thinking of you. Love.
They're so sterile, they almost make the separation worse, don't they? Highlighting the gap rather than bridging it.
Exactly. And this impossibility of real connection, this forced distance, feeds directly into that central philosophical battle,
Mm.
the struggle against abstraction.
Which Ryu sees the plague itself as embodying, right? This invisible, irrational, yet devastatingly real force.
Yeah. For Ria, the plague is an abstraction that kills. And his way of fighting it is through tangible work, concrete actions, not getting lost in theories or despair.
This really comes to a head in his arguments with Rambert, the journalist who wants to leave.
It does. Rambert is consumed by his desire for personal happiness, for reunion with his love. He accuses Ria of living in an abstraction himself.
Because Rhea upholds the law, the quarantine, prioritizing the abstract public good over Rambert's concrete individual love.
Precisely. Rambert sees the regulations, the separation, as just another heartless abstraction. But Ryu's response is profound. He acknowledges the absurdity, the cruelty of the situation, but he says that sometimes abstraction proves itself stronger than happiness.
Meaning what, exactly? That sometimes the impersonal forces, the harsh realities like the plague, like the law needed to fight it, simply override our personal desires.
I think that's it. When the indifferent machinery of the universe, the plague, attacks, you have to meet it on its own terms. You have to employ the necessary, sometimes abstract-seeming tools, like quarantine laws, to fight back. To ignore the abstraction of the law in this case is to surrender to the far worse abstraction of mass death.
It's a grim calculation.
It is. And we see this struggle against abstraction playing out in how the characters cope, or try to cope. Look at Joseph Grant.
His novel, his sentence.
Exactly. He keeps doing his practical work at night, helping with sanitation, recording stats, so that's his concrete contribution. But all his other waking hours, they're poured into perfecting that opening sentence. It's his personal battle.
Debating single words with Ryu and Teru. Should the horsewoman be elegant or slim?
He chooses slim, more concrete, less vague, then agonizes over describing the mare. Not just handsome, maybe beautifully groomed, but no, finally lands on glossy sorrel mare along the flower-strewn avenues.
A minor triumph.
But then immediate despair because flower-strewn avenues has too many seal sounds. The sibilance offends his ear. This almost maniacal focus on linguistic perfection. It's how he maintains sanity. It's his way of imposing order when everything outside is chaos.
Even though his boss tells him just doing his regular job well is more useful.
Right. But Granbrand can't focus on his municipal duties because of this elusive phrase. Yet he meticulously keeps compiling the plague statistics. That same precision applied differently.
Meanwhile, Rambert is going in the opposite direction. He's all about action, but it's frantic escape attempts.
First, he tries the official channels, fills out that ridiculously detailed form, his whole life story.
Only to find out it's just for notifying his family if he dies. Oh, the bureaucratic cruelty.
It's almost like a secondary plague, isn't it? The indifference of the system. So Rambert gives up on that and turns to the underworld.
The smugglers, Garcia, Raoul, all those shadowy figures.
He gets completely wrapped up in the logistics. The 10,000 franc fee, the secret meetings, the timing, the passwords. It becomes this all-consuming project.
So focused on the how of escaping.
That he has this startling moment of realization. He confesses to Ryu, "I'd practically forgotten the woman I loved." His concrete desire for happiness had morphed into this abstract obsession with the mechanics of escape. He lost sight of the reason why.
Wow, that's a powerful insight, and it contrasts so sharply with Teru, who's all about practical organization within the crisis.
Exactly. Teru sees the official response is sluggish, inadequate, so he doesn't wait. He takes the initiative and starts organizing voluntary sanitary groups, ordinary people helping out.
And he sets a moral standard right away, doesn't he? Refusing to use prison labor.
Absolutely. He explicitly says, "I loathe men's being condemned to death, whether by disease or by the state." Ryu joins him immediately, recognizing a kindred spirit.
And when Teru asks Ryu about his motivation, Ryu doesn't talk about God or heroism.
No, he calls it common decency. Just doing your job, fighting death. It's monotonous, exhausting work done without expectation of reward or final victory. Just decency.
Okay, this brings us to what feels like the absolute philosophical core of the book. The event that pushes everyone, Ryu, Penelu, Teru, the reader, to their limits.
The death of Emathon's young son. Yes. This scene is pivotal. It anchors the whole middle section and demands we really sit with it.
Camus doesn't shy away from the details, does he? It's presented unflinchingly.
Precisely because it's the suffering of an innocent. That's what makes it impossible to easily explain away or justify. The boy has a mixed form, bubonic and mnemonic. He suffers horribly, convulsions, agony. It goes on for hours.
And the key witnesses are there. Rhea, Father Panelou, Dr. Castell, Tarot. Watching this protracted death in the auxiliary hospital, it's long, it's agonizing, it tests everything they believe in.
The source details are brutal. The child's small body racked with spasms. And that final sound, not a whimper, but a long, incessant scream, a fierce, indignant protest.
That word indignant, like the child himself is accusing the universe, that's what breaks them, isn't it?
It shatters them. It's the point where rationalism, medicine, theology, they all hit a wall. Rio feels this overwhelming mad revolt. It's not just tiredness. It's a fundamental moral rejection of any system, divine or natural, that allows this.
And he confronts Panelou directly afterwards, draws his line.
Yes. He says, I refuse to love a scheme of things in which children are put to torture. For Ryu, the commitment to alleviating suffering is absolute. It trumps any grand explanation. He's fighting creation itself in that moment.
And this forces Father Panelou into this incredible, painful shift. That second sermon he gives later, it's completely different from the first one.
The transformation is profound, and you hear it in the language first. He stops using the accusatory you. Now it's we. He's part of the suffering community now, not judging it from outside.
He saw the child die. He can't just preach damnation anymore.
No. His second sermon is this desperate, almost tortured attempt to reconcile his faith with that unbearable reality. He talks about God's love being a hard love, demanding total self-surrender.
He argues that the suffering of innocence, which is so humiliating to our reason and our hearts, has to be accepted, even willed.
Yes, accepted and willed as part of God's plan, even if we can't understand it. He calls it the bread of affliction. It forces the Christian, he says, into a radical choice, all or nothing. Trust God completely, even in the face of incomprehensible horror. It's an agonizing position, a leap of faith right over that child's tormented body.
It's such a stark contrast to what Tarot reveals around the same time, his own moral code, his backstory.
It serves as this powerful secular counterpoint, doesn't it? Tarot tells Ryu about his father, the prosecutor, how witnessing the death penalty firsthand made him realize he already had plague within him, complicity in sanctioned killing.
He became obsessed with murder, judgment, leaving home because he couldn't stand a world where humans kill humans, whether through law or disease.
And this leads him to his core belief. The microbe, death, the impulse to harm, that's what's natural. Health, integrity, decency, those are artificial.
A product of the human will, of a vigilance that must never falter. That line is haunting. It suggests morality is this constant, exhausting effort against our own nature.
A Sisyphean task, really. So Tarot defines his own morality simply. Take the victim's side, always. And seek peace, not through final victory, but through the path of sympathy. He knows the fight is endless. Resisting the plague, moral or microbial, is wearying.
And hearing all this, witnessing Althan's son, seeing Rio and Tur's commitment, this is what finally pushes Rambert over the edge, isn't it?
It's the catalyst for Rambert's shift. He's been so focused on his personal happiness, his escape. Now he starts questioning what courage really means. And he makes a conscious decision.
He gives up his escape plan, the one he worked so hard for.
He does. He decides to stay and join Tarou's sanitary groups. He tells Rio he finally understood that they were fighting against creation as it is, resisting the fundamental nature of things. And he realizes, maybe with some reluctance, that he belongs there too, on the losing side.
He chooses solidarity over personal happiness, even if he thinks happiness might be the right choice abstractly. The effort becomes the meaning. #tag size. The ebbing tide and final fates.
So time passes, winter arrives, and slowly, unevenly, the plague starts to recede.
It changes form, though, right? More pneumonic cases which are different faster.
Yes, it shifts, becoming perhaps more contagious in some ways, but the overall number of bubonic cases declines. The death toll curve begins to flatten, and then, mirroring the beginning, but in reverse.
The rats come back.
The rats return, scurrying back into the city. A sign of normalcy returning, however strange.
And the official announcement finally comes.
January 25th. The authorities declare the epidemic definitely stemmed. The prefect orders the streetlights back on full, and the city just explodes.
Instant massive celebration. Drinking, shouting, people embracing in the streets. All that pent-up fear and grief just bursts out. Utterly reckless, probably, but completely understandable.
Absolutely. But while the city celebrates, the fates of our main characters, the ones who really bore the weight of this, are far more complex. Their resolutions aren't simple relief. Take Joseph Grand.
He gets sick, doesn't he? right near the end.
He does. Catches the plague, comes very close to death, and in a feverish moment he tells Rieur to burn it. Burn the manuscript.
The 50 pages containing that one sentence he'd worked on for years. Wow.
It's the symbolic end of that obsessive perfectionism, letting go of the abstraction.
Then he recovers.
Miraculously, yes. A sudden remission. And he wakes up feeling lighter, happier, ready for a fresh start with his writing. And crucially, he immediately simplifies, cuts out all the adjectives.
He finally finds clarity through near death, and he writes to his wife.
He writes that long-delayed letter to Jeanne. The ordeal forced him towards concrete connection, concrete action, away from the trap of perfect words. It's a quiet, beautiful resolution for him.
A complete contrast to Qatar. His ending is bleak.
Utterly bleak. As the plague recedes, Qatar becomes miserable, terrified. The collective danger that shielded him is evaporating, and he knows his personal legal troubles, the police, are coming back for him.
He gets paranoid, isolated.
He swings wildly between sullen withdrawal and this kind of aggressive, forced sociability.
Yeah.
He's desperate not to be abandoned, dropped like a live coal, as the text says.
And eventually he just snaps.
Completely. On the very night the city is celebrating its liberation, Qatar becomes the crazy fellow with a gun, starts shooting randomly at people from his window, pure chaos and desperation.
And he's arrested. Violently.
Yes, dragged out by the police. His story shows that his brief flourishing was entirely parasitic on the town's suffering. When normalcy returns, his world collapses.
But perhaps the most moving, most tragic fate belongs to Theroux.
Jean Theroux. Despite all his vigilance, his philosophical efforts, his practical work, he gets the plague right at the very end as things are winding down.
Of forms, bubonic and mnemonic.
Yes, a terrible combination. Rieux, his friend, watches him die, helpless, exhausted.
It's Rieux's ultimate failure as a doctor, as a friend.
It feels like his greatest personal defeat. He sits there knowing Theroux, who defined integrity as that constant vigilance, has lost the match. But Rieur also thinks about what Theroux did gain.
Knowledge and memories, the experience of the struggle itself.
Exactly. But for Rieur, the feeling is just profound loss, like a mother grieving. No lasting peace is possible, he feels, for those who truly fight the plague.
What about Rambert? Does he get his happiness?
He does. He's reunited with his wife at the station. He achieves the goal he fought so hard for. But it's not simple joy.
There's a distance, a change in him.
He feels this shocking sense of detachment. He realizes that his love, which became this intense, almost pale abstraction during the long separation, now has to confront the real flesh and blood person. He's been changed by the ordeal, the memory of suffering, the solidarity he found. It complicates the simple happiness he craved.
And one last transformation. Emma Othon, the magistrate.
The very formal, rigid M. Othon. His wife died, his son died that agonizing death. After his own time in quarantine, he doesn't just go back to his old life. He returns to the quarantine camp.
As a volunteer. Why?
He tells Theroux, simply, "I'd feel less separated from my little boy." Having lost his entire family structure, his rigid order, he finds a kind of quiet purpose, a connection to his son, through service, by staying close to the suffering. It's a remarkable, understated change. So, in the final pages, Rieux steps out from behind the narrative curtain. He reveals he's been the chronicler all along.
And he justifies his tone, right? That objective, somewhat detached voice he used.
Yes. He explains he deliberately kept his own personal stories, his own grief. His wife also dies, away in the sanatorium to a minimum. He did this, he says, to speak for all.
He wanted to emphasize the shared nature of the suffering, not make his own pain seem unique.
Exactly. By focusing on what people did, what they said, what the documents showed, he aimed to record the collective experience. He felt his own sorrows were just like everyone else's, and in a time of such isolation, highlighting that commonality was important.
And as he watches the town celebrating, finally free, he has this sobering realization.
That the joy is fragile, always imperiled. The crowds can forget, can move on. But he, the witness, the historian of the plague, cannot.
So the chronicle itself, the act of writing it down, that becomes the real victory.
In a sense, its purpose isn't to celebrate a final triumph over evil. It's to bear witness in favor of those plague-stricken people, to remember their struggle, their resilience, their failures, and to state that simple, profound observation. There are more things to admire in men than to despise.
The victory is in documenting the decency, the resistance, even if the outcome wasn't always heroic.
Precisely. But then comes that final, chilling warning, the knowledge that Rieux holds, that the celebrating crowds don't grasp.
The plague bacillus never really dies.
It never dies or disappears for good. It can lie dormant for decades.
Hmm.
In furniture, in linen chests, waiting.
And that perhaps the day would come when, for the bane and the enlightening of men, it would rouse up its rats again and send them forth to die in a happy city.
Chilling.
It's the core lesson, isn't it? Bought at terrible cost. The fight is never permanently won. The potential for chaos, for pestilence, microbial, moral, political, it's always there, waiting for complacency, for a moment of forgetting.
So if we try to boil down the takeaways from this deep dive, that contrast seems central. Between those who found some kind of meaning, maybe even redemption, through solidarity, Ryu, Taru, Grand eventually.
And someone like Retard, consumed by self-interest, who only thrived when society broke down.
And the central lesson isn't about grand gestures, is it? It comes back to Ryu's idea.
Common decency. That weary, unglamorous day-in, day-out effort. Just doing the job, fighting the pestilence, whatever form it takes. Ryu and Toru weren't trying to be saints. They were trying to be healers. Fighting without any guarantee of ultimate victory or reward. Just taking the victim's side. Which circles back to that final, really provocative thought Ryu leaves us with. If all you can really win against the plague is knowledge and memories.
And if, as Teru believed, the microbe, the destructive impulse, is natural, while integrity requires that constant, exhausting vigilance.
Then does human virtue, human decency ultimately depend on just being tired, on constant weary effort?
Does life's true nobility lie only in that endless, often unrewarded resistance against an evil that might be fundamental to existence? And what happens to that nobility when the vigilance falters, as it ultimately did even for Teru?
A powerful, maybe unsettling question to leave you with as you reflect on Camus the Plague.